Good morning and welcome to the Bellingham City Council committee meetings. Today is Monday, June 1st, 2026. We're going to start the committee meetings this morning with Public Works and Natural Resources. That committee is chaired by Councilmember Lillquist, so I'll turn it over to him at this time.
Thank you, President Stone. Joining me on the Public Works and Natural Resources Committee are Council Members Cotton and Anderson. We originally had 3 items scheduled for the agenda. The last item has been rescheduled for, I think, the next meeting. So that brings us to 2 items. The first of those is a contract award for the Tremont Station, Project EU 193, bid number 19B 2026. Let me turn to the summary document. For this project, the improvements consist of a new lift station at the corner of Tremont Avenue and Meridian Street and related force main to connect to the sewer system along Meridian Street between Van Wyck Road and Smith Road. The city publicly opened 5 bids on April 23rd, and Tiger Construction Limited was the responsible bidder who submitted the lowest responsive bid of $3,058,400.30, including sales tax. The engineer's estimate was a little bit higher, $3.3 million, and the project includes an apprenticeship hour requirement due to the scope of the work. Here to take us through any more details is City Engineer Mike Wilson.
Thank you, and good morning. I'm Mike Wilson, Assistant Director of Public Works over Engineering and serving as the city engineer as well. We're grateful for the opportunity to be in front of you with a recommendation for award of the contract for construction of the Tremont Lift Station. I'll share a brief background and give this project some context and then hand it over to Kyle Carlson, our project manager for this project, and then we'll address any questions you may have. For overall context, this project has connection to long-range planning that's been, and the project's been anticipated for many years. As you drive north on Meridian Street, we're just finishing up the Meridian Street sewer line. That's a gravity service line that ends roughly about the Walmart in the Van Wyck Road area. And as you continue north towards Horton and Tremont drives, you go over you crest a little hill, and it drops down into it's a different basin that doesn't gravity flow into the sewer system. So thus it requires this lift station and some force mains to tie into the system that's just recently been completed. Once this project is completed, it'll connect that area to the system, and existing properties that are in the city on the west side of Meridian through there will be able to connect and have access to the sewer system. It also sets the stage for properties on the east side and to the north that were contemplated as part of the Meridian Klein Kelly annexation that's been talked about since 2008 or so. And then also more recently in the comprehensive plan, talk of the Kitech properties up to Larson Road on the east side. They'll be able to have access to the sewer system as part of this improvement. So that's kind of the big picture of things for context of this project. And I'll pass it over to Kyle to give us some more infrastructure history and details of the project and the bid and the award.
Kyle Carlson, project engineer. The new Tremont Lift Station project expands the sewer system in North Bellingham. The new lift station is located on the corner of Meridian Street and Tremont Avenue. There are 2 pumps included with space for a 3rd pump to increase capacity. So the Meridian Tremont site is at the low spot along Meridian Street. A currently unused sewer system built by WashDOT in 2010 as part of a project on Meridian will connect into the lift station. This kind of was all along Meridian, all the way up to Smith Road. The lift station will then allow for service per the Supercom plan. Project includes a new sewer force main from the Tremont lift station all the way to the existing sewer system between Horton and Van Wyck. The project includes a new fiber line that extends from the intersection of Meridian Street and Horton Road to the site of the lift station. That helps with SCADA capacity. Environmental mitigation work is included in the project, and mitigation work for this project is off-site at the Baker Creek open space site off of Northwest Drive. Any questions?
Committee members. Lisa.
Just out of curiosity, it looks like this work will start in July and then wrap up next April. And I'm assuming some of the roadway will be dug up or it'll impact traffic. And given the amount of traffic that goes there, do you know when the date spread that we might be working in the roadway? I'm just kind of wondering if it's during like the Linden Fair time or in the summer, or if that work might happen more fall and winter where it might not impact as much of the high volume traffic.
Lots of those details have to be worked out with the contractor moving forward, getting their schedule. With a project this long, a lot of work will be focused right at the lift station. So I'm not going to say exactly when the construction is, but likely it'll occur a little later.
Yeah, I kind of assumed the lift station area is the larger part of the project, and that might come first, which makes sense. That's over the summer period. I was just kind of hoping the road work would happen after the summer traffic, just for safety reasons for drivers, but
And
I'm
just
sure that's fine too.
Yeah, just a statement on traffic. The main thing is we have one crossing at Tremont for the force main, and then it goes down on the northbound lane on the far side.
Lisa?
I'm going to move approval. It's work that needs to happen, and especially for our future development needs out that direction. So.
A motion to award the contract number 19B for the Tremont Lift Station to Jagger Construction LLC. Are there any further discussions? I actually do have a question. I really appreciate the fact there'll be 2 pumps and room for a third. What is the size of the force mains being connected to, and does it have capacity that if we do need to add a third pump, that it'll also handle that volume?
Yeah, so we have a 6-inch and 8-inch line for force main, and the capacity is all just based on the comp plan, so it covers all the areas that Mike mentioned.
Okay, so the
Yeah.
piping is adequate for all the
Yeah.
growth areas you referred to, and so are the pumps.
Yeah, the intention of the capacity design of the project is to meet what's in the comp plan.
Thank you. Any further discussion? If not, I'll call the question. All in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? I'll bring that forward with a positive recommendation tonight. Thank you very much, Kyle. We'll go on to the next item, which is an agreement with the Washington State Department of Transportation for grant funding for the Pine Street crossing. This is project WF023. The city has been awarded funding for the Pine Street crossing project. The project will update the crossing to quiet zone standards, add multi-use trail crossing, upgrade utilities, and upgrade the Pine Street and Cornwall Avenue intersection. For this, a local agency agreement is required as part of the process of receiving the grant funding from the Washington State Department of Transportation. City engineer, Mr. Anthony, is here to just tell us more about it.
Thank you, Council. Freeman Anthony, Engineering Manager. This is one of the projects that I'm still clinging to in my new role, but it's an exciting one. We received federal funding, both Section 130, which is railway grant funding, and then some recently unobligated regional carbon reduction funding. And so that carbon reduction funding basically nudges us to go ahead and federalize the process now rather than waiting for the construction phase, because it was a great opportunity for us to pounce on it. So this just memorializes the agreement with WashDOT and basically gets us marching down that path for federal funds.
Committee members? Lisa?
No questions, just excited to see this happening. I always kind of feel like, one more ahead of us and get knocked off the list so that we don't have to hear trains. I hear them in my bedroom, and I'm on the other side of Seahome Hill, so looking forward to this. With that, I'll move approval.
We have a motion before us to authorize the mayor to enter into a local agency agreement and any related amendments so that we can move forward with this project. I would note that the grant amount is for $950,000. Total project cost is $2,765,200 at this point. Primary funding is just over $1.4 million from local real estate excise tax funding, and also from our own local transportation fund, $465,000, and those amounts are already in our budget. Don't require a budget amendment. All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? I'll also bring forward that motion with recommendation agreement. And as I said, the third item has been postponed, and that finishes the committee, and the meeting is adjourned. And I turn the meeting back over to Council President Stone.
Thank you, Councilmember Lillquist. So the next meeting is Budget and Finance, which is chaired by Councilmember Anderson. That is scheduled to start at 11:20, so we have a 10-minute recess, and we'll be right back. Thank you. Welcome back to the Bellingham City Council Committee meetings. The next committee is Budget and Finance, and that is chaired by Councilmember Anderson, so I will turn it over to her at this time.
Thank you. We have one item before us today, City Agenda Item 24943. And joining me today on committee is Councilmember Hamel and Lillquist. Today, we're going to be discussing our 2027 budget priorities and constraints. And Mayor Kim Lunn and staff will be doing the presentation. So turn it over to Mayor Lunn.
Thank you, Councilmember Anderson. Good morning to council. So the memo in your packet today, along with some of the preliminary budget prioritization meetings that we had with some of you, is kicking off the 2027 budget process. I've asked that each department have until mid-July to develop their budgets for consideration in July and August. And my intention is to present a proposed 2027 budget to council in late September. The budget challenge that we have faced the last several years unfortunately remains. Our concerted efforts over the last two budgets to limit growth and create and divert revenues to the general fund have been successful in allowing us to generally retain our levels of service. However, there remain very few levers left to pull, and expenses continue to outpace our revenues. Over the course of last year, we completed a public safety level of service needs assessment to identify the resources and associated costs necessary to maintain high-quality fire, EMS, and law enforcement services. That process confirmed the need for additional revenues to maintain quality public safety services, and we recommended, with council's confirmation, exploring a regional fire authority, or an RFA, as a durable funding solution. Creating an RFA has the potential to structurally realign the city and put us on a new financial trajectory, one that is stable and provides the means to make investments across the city. It would enable the city to provide services to these services our community expects across all departments, including library, IT, to parks, while also importantly providing sufficient, dedicated funding for fire protection and emergency medical services. As our financial constraints on the general fund remain, this memo does not identify priority areas for new investment. This budget cycle will seek to minimize impacts to revenue shortfalls, using the city's adopted financial policies as a guide for our decision-making. Additionally, as we navigate this planning process, we will have to prepare budgets that imagine a future both with and without an RFA. The budget process will prioritize preserving the following, including public safety, maintaining our current levels of service as we plan for a potential RFA. We will maintain our programs and policies that support the expansion of housing supply across the continuum of need. And we are seeking to maintain continued support for our internal services, systems, and investments in the people that allow the city to effectively and efficiently deliver services to the public. As always, a budget at its core is a critical policy document and a reflection of the essential work that we uniquely own in this community. How the city spends its money is the purest representation of our priorities and our essential obligations to do public good. I seek your feedback on these priorities and I'm looking forward to working with council in the months ahead to make sure that our budget reflects our community's needs while also taking the critical action to ensure continued fiscal health for the city. And I'm joined here today by Deputy Longman, and we're happy to answer any questions or concerns.
Any questions from the committee? Councilmember Hamel?
Yeah, thanks, Mayor and the team for putting this together. I think it's important to set the stage for the RFA, and also for a situation, as you mentioned, Mayor, that is absent, where an RFA is not on the table, should it not pass. So that's where my concerns lie. With levels of service provision that we have traditionally provided Bellingham, urban levels of service provision, the growth of our community, and the tension of how to figure out a pathway forward. Should we continue on the trajectory that we've been going on for years and years? It's not really a question. It's more of an observation, and for me, it creates a sense of urgency on getting the RFA passed and for it to be fully understood by the public who will be voting on it. So I'm very supportive, and in whatever ways I can help with this process, I will continue to do that.
Councilmember Lilliquist?
Yeah, first of all, Mayor, thank you. I think you express it well, that the budget pressures continue. I would like to ask about the third bullet point, because it's so important to myself and the community, having to do with programs and policies to support expansion of housing supply across the continuum of need. I'm glad to see that will be continuing work, in part because we have dedicated funds. And at this point, we still have federal grant programs that our providers can apply for. Can I get some reassurance that one part of your housing initiative, looking for a third tiny home, I believe we've set aside a possible budget for that. Can I be assured that that is included in part of that bullet as work that will continue?
There are some dollars set aside for that this year. Yeah, it remains a very high priority in the mayor's office. We're working on it as we speak. Jason Corneliuson in our office is taking the lead on that, and we're working on, the struggle is always to find sites, and but we've got a few leads, and we continue to work hard on it. We're hopeful we will have one this year, but couched with, lots can happen still, yeah.
Also on that, what other programs and policies in particular might we highlight that would continue? It seems to me that we enacted significant zoning reforms over the last year. We're kind of waiting to see how they play out, to see what the takers are, to see what the market does. So we're kind of waiting on those to pay off. Are there additional things that will continue even in this budget climate?
I think part of that too is both making sure we're prioritizing investments in the programs and the policies, but also if, with very few levers left to pull, we're making trade-off analysis in a worst-case scenario in the future if the RFA, doesn't succeed, or we continue to be in this cycle where the reality is to adopt this year's budget, we had to do a small number of reductions in force, and we want to avoid that. But if we find ourselves in the future in that scenario where we're considering those, we'd want to make sure that, being able to deliver housing for our community would be part of the way that we're considering any future changes in staffing levels. So.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions or comments from council members? Okay. Councilmember Stone?
Yeah, I guess it's a question not so much to Mayor Lund, but to the rest of the council, just wanting to make sure that earlier rather than later, if there are considerations or priorities from council, to make sure that those are articulated to the mayor and her team going forward. Because what I'm thinking about is, yes, the reality that there will likely be cuts. And so if we're thinking about the larger budget, yes, articulating things that are priorities and things we want to protect. And I think it's even harder, though, and maybe not something people want to venture into, politically, but I think it's the reality of, recognizing as well, trying to identify, are there areas that can be cut or that are, it's hard to say lower priorities. I mean, everything's a priority, but it really is that struggle of how to balance, that budget. So I understand that this is work that your team will be doing and, bringing forward at the end of September a proposal. But whether it's in, open forum here or through other conversations to try and grapple with that, because although we're usually considering and then, considering for adoption the budget that the mayor has brought forward, I feel some shared responsibility in grappling with those difficult decisions. And so I've shared with Mayor Lund that obviously nobody wants to think about, potential layoffs and cuts to staffing. But at the same time, part of my perspective in thinking about, policies and how we approach the budget is we don't know what the outcome of the RFA is going to be, right? That going before the voters in a special election in February is thinking about, my preference would be to identify early, areas for potential cuts or staffing reductions. One, so that individuals know what to expect and can try to prepare accordingly, if you're thinking about what that may look like. But we're obviously hoping not to have to go down that road. But I think, to me, more information earlier is better, even though that might not, that may create additional tensions in other spaces. But just wanting to acknowledge how challenging this process will be collectively. So thanks.
Mayor Lund.
I just wanted to emphasize that, our careful position review process has been very successful as a cost reduction strategy, and we'll continue to lean into that to try and minimize if we find ourselves at that position where we're making difficult trade-offs, that we will have leaned in heavily to that as vacancies arise in the city. How do we analyze carefully whether that's an essential position to be filled or not? And so we're having conversations currently about how to continue to lean in on that strategy and potentially evolve it as a tool right now.
I'm going to share. Thank you. We, as council, had the opportunity to meet with mayor and some select team members, just sharing with the public that in advance to be able to share what our priorities are. And, kind of for me, it was like where to hold the line, where the last cuts would go based on those priorities. So we've been given that opportunity. I'd like to encourage people to continue those conversations through September. One of the things that I had asked, and I don't know if it's going to be possible, and it's probably a lot more math and work, but in my day job when we were looking at cuts, unions were and employees were involved, and so a lot of us decided to increase our furloughs in order to save positions, and it's a little bit more work when okay, we have to save 1.3 million. How are we going to do that? But to make sure, obviously unions are involved, but I'm hoping involved in the way to be able to look at solutions too. So if the math works out to save jobs, I know in my day job we were able to save some jobs, but unfortunately that only happened for 1 to 2 years, and we continue to do cuts. But it gave opportunity for people to be able to look for other employment, and the hope was economy would turn around before we really had to come through and do a larger slice. Unfortunately, the economy didn't turn around, but my hope is in the next couple of years our economy will turn around. So one of my priorities is to save as many positions as possible, because with those positions are career, retirement, medical, there's a lot of things in consideration for that. So just kind of making that a public statement that if we're really looking at those cuts, it's nice to not fill vacant positions for a period of time if we can get by with that. But if we have to do the deeper cuts to involve our workforce to be able to look at any solutions or ideas that they might be able to negotiate to preserve those jobs would be important to me. So, and I know it's important to administration too, so it's not just one value. I think it's a shared value because our employees are our best asset here for the city, and if we can retain them, overall, it's cost savings because the training and the onboarding and everything that goes with jobs. If we can hopefully steward this for a couple more years, hopefully the RFA, will be successful. But if not, we got to plan what's going to look like after that. Any other comments or things to share? Otherwise, that will be the end of committee. I'll turn it back to Council President.
Thank you very much. So that marking the end of the Budget and Finance Committee, we will adjourn for the midday lunch break, and we will reconvene this afternoon with Public Health, Safety, Justice, and Equity at 1 p.m. So until then, we are adjourned. Thank you. Good afternoon, and welcome back to the Bellingham City Council Committee meetings. We're going to start this afternoon with Public Health, Safety, Justice, and Equity. That committee is chaired by Councilmember Hamel, so I will turn it over to him at this time.
Thank you, Council President. This afternoon, I'm joined on the committee by Council Members Huffman and Williams. We have two items before us today. The first one is an update from the Bellingham-Whatcom County Commission on Sexual and Domestic Violence. The Bellingham-Whatcom County Commission on Sexual and Domestic Violence was formed jointly by the City of Bellingham and Whatcom County in 1998. The commission inspires and coordinates our community's efforts to address sexual and domestic violence. Each year, staff from the Domestic Violence Commission provide an update to inform the council of their work, as well as to provide education about the impact of domestic violence in our community. In our community. And this afternoon, we have Council President Stone is listed as one of the presenters. Is that not accurate?
I believe that's an oversight from when this was initially before Committee of the Whole, and we were thinking that, it was best suited for your committee.
Okay, well, we would love to welcome Susan Marks from Bellingham-Whatcom County Commission on Sexual and Domestic Violence, who is the director. Welcome, Susan.
Councilmember Stone, you're welcome to do the presentation if you'd rather. Thanks for having me. Susan Mark, she, her pronouns. I'm the director of the Bellingham-Whatcom County Commission on Sexual and Domestic Violence. And as mentioned, I report out every year on the work we're doing, the funding that you are providing, what that's going to, and most importantly, what is happening with people in this community who are experiencing domestic violence and sexual assault. So this was already read, formed in 1998. We are a commission of the City of Bellingham and Whatcom County, here to serve and promote an improvement in systems for survivors and the community in Bellingham and throughout the county. So we don't do the direct services, we support the organizations who do direct services. Our members are in leadership positions, basically in all the sectors that you would think would be interacting with survivors, children, and people who cause harm. We this year added a few new positions, so thanks to the council and the mayor for allowing that to happen so that we could expand our connections with the organizations that are really doing work to serve survivors. That included, we add an additional position for someone from a public school. We've always had one superintendent, and now we have two leadership positions. For a representative from the Whatcom Racial Equity Commission, and then two more community at large positions to be able to recruit, again, more voices to our table. And Sarah Chaplin and Chief Mertzig serve on the commission in their roles for the city. We are funded through the City of Bellingham, and Whatcom County is our general operating support. Currently, we get $90,000 each year from each of those entities. We also have a grant from the Department of Justice, Office on Violence Against Women, and are having a commission, I will say throughout my experience applying and being in phone calls and webinars with other organizations and communities who are thinking about applying, is having this commission, I think, really makes us competitive, in part because when people say, well, how would I ever get a superintendent or a judicial officer to call me back or be interested? And we have some of those relationships. So I think that really makes a big difference. And having the city and the county support behind that brings the people to the table. So when we want to apply, it's really, can we do this project? Not, can we get a hold of these people? The grant we currently have is for $600,000 over 3 years. It funds us, it funds DVSAS, it funds law advocates, and it's funding a number of trainings for judicial officers, court staff, guardians ad litem, people who are doing bilingual advocacy. So that is really helpful because it allows us to do, we have a whole staff person who's able to focus on that work, which is to improve the civil and family court processes for survivors. So that's parenting plans, divorce, and protection orders, which the municipal courts don't do those. So everyone in Whatcom County who wants one of these civil or family protections goes to district or superior court, and overwhelmingly they're doing it pro se, so without an attorney. So part of making that process more accessible is to have people trying to navigate a system without an attorney that is set up through the legal system. And then what is now going to be our third annual summit on missing and murdered Indigenous women and people. Again, the city and the county are funding our staff time so we can host it, but sponsorships are paying for all of the costs to make that happen. And we continue to seek more sponsorships as the event continues to grow each year. So, and in your packets and at the end, there will be a little information about this year's summit. So we do things like we have meetings, and our meetings, we try not to make them just to have meetings. Last week we had our annual meeting, and we focused it around workplace responses. So the goal was to bring in what are survivors in our community saying about when they are experiencing domestic violence or sexual assault and go to work. And our state has a domestic violence, sexual assault, and stalking leave law, which not all employees and maybe not all employers are aware of or granting. But also what are best practices in keeping people employed who are experiencing domestic violence and sexual assault. Thinking about the internal facing, not just the external facing to the community, but we want to be organizations where people can keep their jobs and stay safe. So we spent time looking at the data, thinking about what our strengths and barriers are, and everyone wrote on a little index card, something that they were going to do within 60 days within their organization. And this is when it's really great that people remember for a moment that they are in leadership positions and they can make things happen. And so things are really happening to notify employees about the desire, to do trainings for managers, to put out more resources into the community, so that's really exciting. We develop tools, we provide and support and coordinate professional education and training. We gather data primarily through getting survivor feedback, doing case reviews, and getting feedback from stakeholders, people who are working within the systems. And then we're kind of there usually on like individual cases. People reach out just to ask, mainly this is more complex than our policy, so what's a good practice or what is a good way to move forward with this specific situation? Into a resource for basically everyone, so all the systems that people interact with, all of us interact with in our community, which means that people who are survivors and their families are also interacting with these organizations. And then in all of our work, we are really focused on integrating a way to make sure that we are addressing both the people who experience the most barriers when they seek support and people who are most targeted for violence. Addressing root causes and bringing up topics that can often be underreported, overlooked. So, for example, thinking about sexual violence within intimate relationships is a lot of times that is the last thing that people want to disclose and talk about, and so we have to make sure our systems are really prepared to ask those questions. Thinking about criminalized survivors, so survivors who end up arrested related to something related to their survivorship, so how are we making sure this, that they are getting services in the community, all of those different things. So our current projects, you have your work plan. Oh, you also have the membership roster. I meant to mention that. You also have the work plan in your packets. Our current projects, and a couple of these I'll speak a little bit more to, is Reimagining Justice Project, which is our work on restorative justice, the Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and People work, the Justice for Families grant, which is that federal grant, and I'll talk specifically about a case review we did under that. And then some work with schools, including this community of practice that we're going to be starting, and a Coaching Boys into Men pilot, and I'll briefly talk a little bit more about each of those. So the Sexual Assault Protection Order case review, this one is one that we did that was funded by the Office on Violence Against Women grant, and it was to look at people who are applying for civil sexual assault protection order, which means, again, overwhelmingly they're going to court by themselves without an attorney to ask for this civil protection that would mostly order someone to stay away from them and not contact them. And we had about 20 people on the team. In advance, we got about 40 different protection order applications and condensed them and deciding to review 9, which was like the hardest thing because I wanted to look at all of them. But already people put into a 3-hour meeting plus about 2 hours of prep time. So we kept it to 9 and identified the strengths and gaps in our system. All of these protection orders came from district court. Most protection orders that are sexual assault in this county are filed in district court. And we found some strengths. The number one being that they gave us all of their protection orders, all the filings, all the dockets, all of the judicial notes so that we could actually really look at what was happening, what people were saying. They sent recordings of all the hearings. So their willingness to open themselves up really made it so that we could do this. They've done recent increases in electronic communication, which is great because one of the things we saw was like how much falls on the victim to communicate and to go back and to call, and they are now doing a lot more that's electronic that makes that a lot easier on the victim. And one thing that is really key that's best practice that not many locations in the state are doing is whether or not they grant the order, when they're in a hearing, they will say to the respondent, who's the person accused of the sexual assault, that they are not to contact that person. There may not be an order in place, but in open court, the petitioner and survivor let them know they want no contact. There's no reason to have contact. These aren't people with children in common. And so if they did contact them, then having been told in open court that they are not to have contact, then the victim does have a reason to come back and get an anti-harassment order. So even if they can't give that protection, which is very important, at least the respondent knows, do not contact this person. Like that is what the primary thing they want, and that's really important. And we looked at the protection orders. One person said that in their order, this person continues direct and indirect stalking and harassing by monitoring myself and husband to intimidate at work and local area. I don't feel safe. So that's what she put in her order, and her order was granted. Some of the things we found looking at the process, it is complex and time consuming. Sometimes there were continuances, like 5 to 7 continuances for a case, and so people would like show up for their hearing, whether in person on Zoom, and then there would be a continuance, especially if the respondent had an attorney and then the victim is pro se. There was a lot of things that could get pushed off. They just kept the victim that whole time waiting and going through this process. A lot of legalese, again, even though it's a pro se process, there's a lot of words that are challenging to understand what they mean if you're not an attorney. Judges have their inconsistencies in how they prepare for the hearings. Some are prepared differently than others. There seem to be differences and discrepancies in how people are applying a civil legal standard as preponderance of evidence, which is like 50.1%. And the criminal standard is reasonable doubt, which I don't know what percent that is, but it's more like beyond a reasonable doubt, right? And so a civil legal standard should be about, is it more likely than not? Like you don't need proof, you don't need a law enforcement report. Most applications would suffice because there's enough detail in them and have gone through the process that it's more likely it happened than not. We have a very high denial rate of temporary orders in this county, which is something that has been true for at least 10 to 15 years and much higher than any other county throughout the state, including Skagit County. So that was something that brought up a concern because those are 2-week orders, and there are times when someone, if you filed a petition, then a notice goes to the other person that they're going to get a hearing for a final petition. So there's a notice that someone has filed something against them without that protection. And there often seem to be a limited analysis in how power differences could affect consent and non-consent. So if your housing depended on someone, maybe you didn't have the power to consent in the way that someone thought you should, or your job depended on someone, or you thought they could out you to your workplace. So those were some of the things we saw. And then we saw some great opportunities for action. And again, because we have good partnerships in this grant and judicial officers who are on board, increasing approval rates of temporary protection orders, putting together judicial training, which they've already agreed to do, is have us host a series of trainings for them this winter, identify a system for the court to appoint attorneys to pro se petitioners or survivors. That's actually something that passed in a protection order law. I can't remember if it went into place in 2022 or 2023, but we need a system to be able to make that happen. But then if a petitioner does not have an attorney and the respondent does, the court can appoint an attorney to the petitioner to represent them in that civil case. Help the courts can help petitioners understand how DVSAS support can be useful. They're always giving out flyers and brochures, but some words about how DVSAS could help them, not just in the hearing, but follow up with healing and support groups and things. And then there are ways to increase meaningful language access and disability access. And I will say this one, the courts are extremely aware of the limitations that we all have related to, especially interpreters and translators, and mainly wanting to name that as a support for them as, we're all looking for ways to make our systems work better. So, and in one order, another person said, since the night of the assault, my life has changed. I'm a completely different person. I feel unsafe leaving my home or even going outside. Another project I wanted to briefly talk about, I talk about this every year, and some year I'm going to come and say, we did our first case, but is this restorative justice project. Our primary partners are the Dispute Resolution Center, Western Washington University, and a number of different individual kind of local consultants and facilitators who do this kind of work. And then also survivors, because this is about developing survivor-centered restorative justice processes. We've done a number of projects to get us to where we are today, learning from survivors, from literature, from people doing this kind of work, consulting with existing programs, applied for funding, none of which we've got yet. But next, we decided to switch our strategy. We've been asking for funding to build the capacity to do a case, and we have decided, given that we have these great facilitators who are currently donating their time, we are preparing to shepherd one case through a restorative justice project without additional funding, pilot that case and evaluate it, and then be able to show, because one of the things we keep getting from funders, besides the fact that they think, this is great, and we wish we could fund everyone, and they're getting way more applications than they can fund, but also is wanting a little more specifics about what it could look like. So we want to be able to show them that. So then we'll be back looking for funding again with the hopes of housing a program at the Dispute Resolution Center with consulting and advisory board that would include DV and SA, people with that knowledge. And then we just entered into some conversations with the county prosecution, public defense, and health and community services. A group of people from our community went to a training on a specific type of restorative justice process in April. People went for a whole week and came back excited, and this would be one that would be embedded in the legal system. So we started talking about how to move that forward, and that's also exciting. So it would help people could be diverted from the legal system to engage in a restorative justice process if they met certain conditions that would make it seem like they could change through that process. And when we talked to survivors, one person said, it's been such an ongoing curiosity, what does making this right look like? And that's really what it's about, is making it right for people, not just making whatever it is happen that our systems currently are prepared for. And this is about creating more options, not taking away the options we currently have. And then we've been invited to do a lot of work recently with schools. We started in 2025. In the spring, we hosted a couple of workshops that was for districts throughout the county, in addition to private schools, on trauma-informed responses for student survivors. And then this year, we hosted a workshop in January that was on working with students who've caused harm, and so ways to provide education, repair, and accountability for students who are there in middle school or high school, the groups we're working with, and they have often caused real harm, and also it's a great age to provide some education about what they have done wrong, the harm they've caused, and ways to think and act differently. And we've been asked to do more, so we're working towards starting for next school year a community of practice where we would host 3 workshops per year based on the surveys. 3 workshops per year, 3 to 4 hours in person, all the people who are interacting directly with students and student discipline and support. And really have things to keep going deeply into how to support survivors and how to support accountability and repair for students who are accused of harm. And it's really part of it is providing resources, and part of it is providing a space for all these people who have different pieces of information and opportunities to share with each other so that they can learn from each other, because these people don't all get it together in a room at the same time. So it's a great way for all of us to learn together. And we're starting to recruit coaches. So if you need coaches who coach high school boys, who you think would want to do this Coaching Boys into Men pilot, it's an evidence-based violence prevention program. It's about 10 to 15 minutes a week of a curriculum that coaches get trained to present, and helps build healthy relationships, healthy masculinity, empathy, consent skills in young male athletes, with the idea that often they end up being leaders in their community. And then a fun side project that came from our connections with both judicial officers and schools is one of the things we kept hearing was the challenges. So a judicial officer can enter a protection order, and then the school can't always enforce it because they are required to provide education for both students depending on the size of the school. It may be very challenging to keep them within a certain number of feet from each other. And so, again, we have a really open bench of judicial officers and superintendents that we're helping coordinate a time to bring them together to think about their specific language judicial officers can use in their protection orders that could be specific to school grounds, which would protect that survivor there and allow the accused student to go to school, and also things that judicial officers can help schools with enforcement. And besides just two students, sometimes often there are two parents whose kid go to the same school, and so how to enforce those protection orders, kind of giving the schools the skills to do that. And we're going to be talking about this actually at our July commission meeting. We're going to do a brief overview of our school prevention response and using this as a time to gather feedback and ideas. We want to get some more input from students, families, and staff about what the needs are. So if anyone would like to come to that meeting, I would suggest contacting me in advance because I'm not actually positive we're going to be at Whatcom Community College, and it's good to know exactly where we are. And also that doesn't tell you where at the college. Things change quickly. And then another event for your calendars is our 2026 Summit on Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and People. Can include, as previous years, we're going to have the Lummi Victims of Crime Shawl Ceremony with Anton George, who's a Lummi tribal member, brings the drumming and sings a song he wrote on missing and murdered Indigenous women and people. Family and Survivor panel, we have two keynote speakers. One is an attorney who's a member of the Cherokee Nation who supports families as they go through the legal system. And then another one, Deborah Parker, is a Tulalip tribal member and founded a Healing Coalition for boarding schools and has done a lot of advocacy at the federal level. And then we'll have storytelling, we have violins closing today, a youth panel, which was very popular last year. So if you're able to come, it would be great. I know Bellingham PD will be there. They just told me it's already in their calendars. And it really means a lot, I think, for our community members to see all of us there and supporting that work. And this year we've decided to be very education focused with some clear actions, so everyone will leave with like a checklist of within your discipline, here's some work that you can actually do, directed by local tribes and what they're asking for. And that's it. And that's not it, but I tried to keep it brief.
Thanks, Susan. Committee? Go ahead. Councilmember Huffman.
Thanks for the presentation. As you give every year, I always look forward to it. I think it just strikes me as you're talking how much work that you do on the amount of budget that you have. I think it is money very well spent. I kind of see it as you're influencing small steps of systems change to make our community safer. Ultimately, the experience that people have with our systems as it improves, the more people will be willing to use those systems and find accountability and justice. So thank you so much for the work. I really appreciate it. But of course, my special project is the Reimagining Justice for Survivors, the restorative justice work. And I went through the learning series many years ago now, where, we were all kind of learning, well, what is restorative justice exactly, and how does it exist, and potentially how could it exist in our community? And so I'm really glad to see that work is still ongoing. I know that finding some funding was a little bit difficult. I think even just the first step of helping people understand what restorative justice is and what would it look like. There's quite a work to be done there, but I think that for our community, more options for finding justice and accountability could be incredibly helpful. And so I hope that work can continue and that somebody will give you a whole bunch of money to keep doing that at some point.
Just waiting.
So,
someone. You know any benefactors? Love restorative justice like I do. Yeah. Yeah, thank you. I appreciate your support in that area for the years. Yeah.
Councilmember Williams.
Good. I just want to say this is the world that introduced me to public service in Bellingham years and years ago. And to see how much the scope of this work has expanded over those many years is very, it's something that I'm very appreciative of, because I've experienced, not me personally, but I've known people that have experienced domestic violence and and dealing with these issues. And to see that this has grown from just a crisis management situation to something that looks at the future and hopefully moves people forward in a way that they can re-enter society and re-enter the real world and be successful at navigating those waters. I deeply, deeply appreciate that.
Thank you so much. It's good to hear that historical perspective. When you're in it, sometimes you wonder, are we making a difference? And then things keep coming up, and yeah, but it's nice to see
Yeah,
the whole story.
back in my day, it was crisis services.
Yeah, yes. Still in that building.
Yeah.
Anything further? Council members? Go ahead, Council President.
I just had a question about you were saying the low approval rates grant rates for the temporary protection orders. And any sense of why, I mean, if there was something that was deficient in what's being brought forward, and a lot of those cases are pro se, so was there some gap or?
I mean, that definitely is a piece of it. However, our being different than other counties means that that can't be the whole piece. So one thing that we haven't done in many years is having just a hearing for the temporary order, which would be with the petitioner and the judicial officer, so they could actually ask questions if something isn't clearly represented in their writing. Another thing is, and this will be a piece of the training on the neurobiology of trauma, is we've heard that there can be some misunderstanding of what an immediate report is. And so if you're filing a protection order maybe 3 to 6 months after an incident, it doesn't feel like a crisis need, and just helping to recognize just the way it gets to realize what happened to you, to even realize, I mean, what we actually, in trying to get survivor input, we're asking people, we wanted to hear from people who hadn't sought protection orders, and it's very hard to find people who haven't heard of, because people either haven't heard of them and thought they're for them, or they've applied and had challenges. So some of it is about people, I mean, it can take so long before you go through a legal process. And so just helping that understanding of the neurobiology of trauma, I think, will be a huge piece, and how important that initial 2 weeks, while it doesn't maybe sound like needed, like you'll have the hearing in 2 weeks, but that just helping understanding of how dangerous that time can be for survivors, I think could also increase the temporary order. So a lot of the training they've committed to, I'm hoping, will help that process in the future.
Just a quick follow-up, and so that training was going to be focused on the judicial officers, or?
Yeah, basically across the court system, they are going to do training. So the judicial officers, actually 2 judicial officers went to a training in April that we sent them to a national training on domestic violence, sexual assault, and that I think was very, they said it was nice that we are doing a lot and more than in some communities, and learning very specific things that we can do differently that they brought back. And then we're going to bring in some trainers to train the entire judicial bench here. So, but then also court clerks, like I said, guardians ad litem, kind of everyone who work, family law attorneys, so everyone who's kind of connected to the court system. And that our grant is paying for all those trainings, which is great.
Committee, council, any further comments or questions? I just wanted to point out that pretty much, I think everyone up here is either served on DVSAS's board, which is a connected organization to the work that you do, or the commission, or in some way, clearly this work resonates with leadership in this community. And the work, as Councilmember Huffman said, is very important. And thank you for coming every year and providing this update. I think it's really important that the public hears this, as well as the council members here. So thank you very much for coming today.
Thank you for making the time for me each year.
Okay, we'll move on to the second item and final item this afternoon. This is an agreement with the U.S. Department of Homeland Security for a 2026 FIFA grant. The objective of this grant program is to provide targeted funding to enhance security and preparedness for the 2026 FIFA World Cup events hosted in Bellingham. This grant will be used for overtime and equipment. And here to take us through is Deputy Police Chief Jay Hart.
Thank you.
It's all yours.
Thank you. The objective of the federal fiscal year 2026 FIFA World Cup grant program is to provide targeted funding to enhance security and preparedness for the FIFA World Cup events. Funding authority for this grant is the U.S. Department of Homeland Security. As one of the state's official fan zone locations here in Bellingham, we'll be hosting watch parties for 6 of the Seattle-based FIFA games, primarily at the Colshan trackside, with one match also being held at a block party in the 1300 block of Commercial Street. Due to these events, we believe there's a potential for large crowds and traffic-related issues, which in turn could bring significant security risks on those days. We also anticipate an additional layer of crowding and traffic-related issues due to our proximity to the border and the expected increase in FIFA fans traveling through Bellingham to arrive either at the Vancouver FIFA site or the Seattle FIFA site. This funding will enhance our ability to prepare for, protect against, and respond to these security threats or emergencies during the World Cup matches. The funding will be used to purchase 2 drones, protective equipment for a bicycle response team, and a portable X-ray machine for our hazardous devices unit. It'll also be used to cover overtime and standby time costs associated with the World Cup events. So it is our request that you authorize the city to enter into this agreement with the Department of Homeland Security for the 2026 FIFA World Cup grant.
Thank you, Deputy Chief. Committee, any questions? Okay. We are asked for an approval on that as the action request. Go ahead, Councilmember Anderson.
I don't know if Marilyn is prepared to share what was shared with me earlier. There is a section in here in the contract, Article 11, which talks about requirements regarding immigration and what they list here as illegal aliens, which we don't use locally. But something was shared with me how this is not enforceable, but I had a concern because it involves ICE and, having to, collaborate with them, which goes against the Keep Washington Working Act. So Marilyn said there was some information that might be able to be shared.
Good afternoon, Council. Deputy City Attorney James Erb. So we, as you may recall, the city participated in some litigation against the federal government some time ago around some of the changes in approach to issues involving immigration and also diversity, equity, and inclusion programs. So we have a process established through the City Attorney's Office with the Mayor's Office to essentially send a formal notice to the federal government whenever we're accepting grant funding, because their terms are usually like one size fits all, like the ones that Councilmember Anderson were pointing out. So we alert the federal government to the fact that we are parties to this lawsuit, that there's a preliminary injunction that prevents those particular provisions from applying to the city of Bellingham. And if that injunction were to be dissolved or go away, all that would mean is that we would just renegotiate with the federal government around the terms that we object to. So this is not a way of accepting this grant funding does not mean that we will suddenly have to comply with the new federal rules with which we disagree and which a court has said we do not have to comply with. Any questions?
Thank you, because I did a deep dive last night and all the federal regulations stated in here, so I definitely was concerned and would have voted no tonight just because of what was in here. So thank you for that reminder and also sharing, just in case anyone in the public should look at this and have the same concerns. It's nice to know that this would not necessarily be applied to us because of that injunction, and if so, we'd renegotiate. I did have a follow-up. I assume worst-case scenario is if the government, if somehow that decision went against those who are party to that litigation. Worst case scenario is we might have to pay back if they don't renegotiate with us correctly somewhere down the line. Would that be a correct statement?
I mean, I think that's probably the worst case scenario. Unlikely, but possibly.
I'm hoping unlikely, given how long things take to get through the court, that we might have a different administration looking at things. Thank you.
Councilmember Williams.
I'd like to recommend that we move to authorize the mayor to enter into this agreement.
Okay, motion's been made. No seconds necessary. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstentions, recusals, motion carries 3-0. I'll bring that forward tonight. Thanks for the explanation from the administration. Thank you, Deputy Chief. That takes us to end of committee.
Thank you very much, Councilmember Hamel. So the next committee this afternoon is Parks and Recreation. That is scheduled to begin at 1:40. So we'll have just a brief break and we will reconvene shortly. Okay, see you soon. Welcome back to the Bellingham City Council committee meetings. The next committee we have this afternoon is Parks and Recreation. That committee is chaired by Councilmember Williams, and I believe that we may have a substitution for one of the other council members on that committee, but I will turn it over to Councilmember Williams.
Thank you very much, President Stone. Today I am joined by Council Members Hamel, and in the absence of Council Member Cotton, Council Member Huffman will be substituting for him. So we have two items on our agenda today. The first item is Agenda Bill 24954, which is a contract award for the Gills Court Trail, project number PO 145, bid number 15B 2026. The city is constructing a multi-use trail from Gills Court to Telegraph Road. The city opened 9 bids on April 21st, 2026, and Specialty Equipment, Inc., DBA Neptune General Contractors, was the responsible bidder who submitted the lowest responsive bid of $873,428.25. The engineer's estimate was $1,797,617. This project includes an apprenticeship hour requirement due to the scope. So at this time, I'm going to turn this over to Nicole Oliver, Parks and Recreation Director, and Paul Knipple, the Greenways Project Manager.
Thank you, Councilmember Williams. I have today with me Paul Knipple, who's our Greenways Project Manager. This is a project that has been we've been looking forward to for a long time. You may have recalled that when Public Works presented the Transportation Improvement Program, this was one of the highlighted projects because it is going to create a connection north-south for the people at King Mountain and along Bakerview that will connect to the now overlaid Telegraph Road and will bypass that southern portion of James Street between Sunset Pond, well, really between Orchard, Sunset Pond, and Telegraph that has no shoulders whatsoever. So this will be a really enormous improvement to access for the north, for the neighborhood. They'll be able to get down through, there's a couple of different ways you can get down. I was just showing Councilmember Lilliquist some of the options. And if you look on the Strava heat map, you'll see that people make their way through to the south in a lot of different ways. But we do expect that the trail will be built. The storage, it's kind of a fancy storage facility project is what was required to dedicate this trail easement. There's some topography challenges. It's a pretty expensive project because of the walls that it takes to get from Gills Court up to Telegraph. And then once we bought the Telegraph Road property, when we were unsuccessful for a couple of years trying to get an easement from the owner, we ended up buying that property outright. So then we had to update the design to include that connection. So this complete project did come in quite a bit below the engineer's estimate, and the real difference between the other bidders was about access, and we think that they have a good relationship with the property owner who's giving them some pretty good access to do the project because it's a narrow width to do some pretty significant work. So if you have any other questions, I'm happy to answer them, or Paul is here if I cannot.
Okay, committee members? Dan Hamel.
I don't have any technical questions. I think that this speaks to the city's emphasis and the park's really outstanding work in terms of providing connectivity and amenities to the north end of Bellingham, parts that not traditionally, but in the past, I guess, just didn't have as much in the way of trails and parks and things like that. So I'm very pleased with this, and I'm glad the estimate or the responsive bid came in at what it did. That's outstanding. So I'm going to go ahead and vote to approve.
Okay. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries, and I will report that at the evening meeting tonight. Okay, thank you very much. Now for item number 2. This is going to be Agenda Bill 24955, which is a resolution authorizing application for recreation and conservation office grant for the Middle Fork Spring Open Space Trail. The City of Bellingham Parks and Recreation Department requires City Council's authorization to apply for a grant from the Washington State Recreation and Conservation Office, commonly called RCO, to develop the Middle Fork Spring Open Space Trail. The Parks Department intends to apply for a grant in the amount of $1,470,000 to help fund this project. And once again, I'll turn it over to Parks and Recreation Director Nicole Oliver.
Thank you, Councilmember Williams. This is another kind of long-standing connection that we've been trying to make between Cordata Park and the future Van Wyck Park, which is far to the east. We had other trail potential that really ended up with some severe wetlands that are gorgeous. To the east of Cordata Park are some really beautiful forested wetlands. So this property became available, and we have spent quite a bit of time working on a design. It's a complicated property. You see the panhandle that extends to Meridian. That is going to be surplused as commercial property. And the remaining parcel is quite a bit of wetlands. And the project is a pretty elaborate series of boardwalk experiences. It also had to be moved for an eagle's nest in the middle of design. So we're applying for this grant. We think it's going to compete well. We also know that the timing would push the construction likely to 2028 if we're successful with this grant. And I'm here again to answer any questions, as is Paul, also the project manager.
Are there any questions, committee? Yes.
Not so much a question. Same, I guess, same thoughts as the previous agenda item. Yet another added amenity in this different part of town, close to the last one. Therefore, I'm going to go ahead and vote to approve.
Okay. It's been moved to approve. Any other discussion? Councilmember Cotton.
Can you remind me so a connection to Meridian is not possible on that site?
Yes, that is correct. We actually were looking at it for some other potential projects, but the better connection for pedestrians is to Stewart Road, because that has a lit intersection for crossing. So it is a better pedestrian connection to connect Cordata to the services there on Meridian.
Thank you for that.
Okay, any further questions, rest of the council? Seeing none, I will call the question for approval. All in favor, say aye.
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 All opposed? Motion carries, and I will report that at the evening meeting tonight.
Thank you.
That concludes our agenda today, so I will adjourn the meeting and toss it back to you, President Stone.
Thank you very much, Councilmember Williams. So this afternoon, our next committee will be Community and Economic Development, which is chaired by Councilmember Cotton. That committee is scheduled to begin at 2:05, so we will have a brief break, and we will reconvene shortly. Thank you for your patience. Good afternoon and welcome back. The next committee for us this afternoon is Community and Economic Development. That committee is chaired by Councilmember Cotton, so I'll turn it over to him at this time.
Good afternoon. I'm joined on this committee by council members Huffman and Williams. We have two agenda items before us today. The first is a presentation by the Port of Bellingham's Regional Economic Partnership, and 2-for-1, Western Washington University's Small Business Development Center. As background, through the Regional Economic Partnership interlocal agreement with the port and Whatcom County, the city has supported a collaborative commitment to fund the Port of Bellingham's and Western Washington University's Small Business Development Center economic development programs. Agency staff is providing an overview of their agency's 2025 accomplishments. We're joined by CJ Seitz, Executive Director of the WWU SBDC, as well as Tyler Schroeder, the Director of Economic Development at the Port. But first, I'll recognize Tara Sindine, the city's Community and Economic Development Manager.
Good afternoon. Since you did such a fabulous job on full-blown introduction, including our guests, I'm just going to turn it over to Tyler. Thanks.
Good afternoon, Council. Mayor, thanks for having me today. Tyler Schroeder, Economic Development Director for the Port of Bellingham. Excited to kind of give a background and information on the 2027 through 2031 Comprehensive Economic Development Strategy. And I've also integrated in just a 2026 annual update. So we're going to do just a couple of highlights from this last year and then dive in a little bit on a high-level discussion on the SEDS work that we're doing. I did not have a link in the packet, but the presentation has been sent to you all as well because there's some questions at the end that I'd like to just recognize that's in there and then get some input maybe outside of this presentation if council members have the chance. But again, the Port of Bellingham's Economic Development Team, myself as the director, John Mitchner and Corey Olson as project managers, and then Dr. Jennifer Novak is a consultant that works on the SEDS work and is integral to that work and the interviews and the work that's going on associated with that. So just giving a Tri-Funder update, still recognizing the historical name of Tri-Funders over the years because of the important relationship between the City of Bellingham, Port of Bellingham, Whatcom County, and give the update on the division work. And as many council members know, and the city is integral in this conversation through the Comprehensive Economic Development Strategy update. We've had one from 2022 through 2026. We are doing a lot of work this year, and we all know how important economic development strategies are as the moment, and we want to have a coordinated effort moving forward. So just a few highlights. I'm going to focus on 3 sections of our economic development strategies. One on base economy, really kind of looking at ways the Port of Bellingham and our partners look to build upon and strengthen our economic base. I'm going to focus on an example on infrastructure, really developing and enhancing those critical infrastructure and promote economic development and resiliency. And then some discussion on workforce and the coordination that my team does with workforce educational attainment opportunities in different programs that are here. So focusing a little bit on business expansion work. So we, along with many others, works on business retention, expansion, and recruitment. Expansion is the most important name of the game in economic development. Job growth is somewhere between 85% of jobs come from existing businesses. In 2025, the Port's team assisted the Port of Bellingham's real estate team working with Pure Blue Tech, which is a really neat cutting-edge clean tech company that was located in unincorporated Whatcom County, actually. Kind of recruited to town and reached out to the Port's economic development team 5, 6, 7 years ago and found a location just north of the airport, south of the city of Ferndale. They've been seeing so much expansion that they came to the Port's economic development team looking for additional square footage. They were in a 10,000 square foot facility and they needed assistance finding close to 50,000 square feet. In those conversations, we actually were able to work with the owner of the old Silfab building down on the waterfront and the Port of Bellingham's real estate team. We did kind of a 3-way agreement in which allows for the Port to help facilitate Pure Blue Tech moving down into that facility and also identifies a way where the Port may be able to acquire that property within a certain time frame, become a landlord, get it back to the Port's assets. But most importantly, be able to help kind of grow Pure Blue Tech from currently 10 employees to within 50 to 60 as it moves forward. You'll see they're still moving into the facility, but they have a lot of growth as it moves forward. So just a really good example of kind of a story and visual on business expansion and the work that we do associated with that. Next, kind of looking at the next base economy and thinking about agriculture. Agriculture is such a strong economic sector here in Whatcom County, and there's a lot of discussion about how to provide infrastructure around these different sectors. And over many years, the port and the economic development team has been working on Whatcom Food and Farm Station, acquiring the old Boxberry Farm on Northwest Drive. We also partnered with a number of agricultural interests in Whatcom County that have become the nonprofit Whatcom Food Farm Station, and working towards kind of a first of its kind agriculture research facility, really focused on innovation, sustainability, and the future of local farming. When you think about this, also just recognize that agriculture production in Whatcom County utilizes a number of the cold storage, food processing facilities in the city of Bellingham, and likely exports their products through Bellingham Cold Storage and Lineage there at the waterfront. So just trying to make that connection between the infrastructure that these different sectors need and the connection that the city plays and the tenants and businesses within the city of Bellingham play to strengthen our vast types of economic sectors here in Whatcom County. Third, just the goal of infrastructure itself. The city council and city administration and planning are aware of the industrial land study that the Port of Bellingham did. Had the opportunity to come give a presentation to council probably last fall, I would say. And really kind of identifying some countywide assessment on the land supply and the demand and understanding the constraints a little bit more. That work's been kind of integrated into the discussions that the city's been having on the comp plan and the discussions that the county council has been having on the comp plan. I'm happy to acknowledge that the planning staff at the county are really identifying some specific language in Chapter 7 of the county's comp plan. Unfortunately, they're not done with their comp plan process. But that gives us an opportunity to add some additional language to strengthen kind of the next steps of the industrial land study. And we'll really be able to provide some background and input. And I'm sure we'll continue to work with Chris Behe and planning staff and Tara as it relates to that conversation here in the city of Bellingham. The workforce development, there's a big component of economic development. It's not just incentives for businesses, right? It's the work that the SBDC does and all of our agencies do associated with making it welcoming and an opportunity where businesses have what they need to grow. A big component of that is workforce development. So the Port of Bellingham's been really partnering with other agencies in regards to economic development, or in regards to workforce development. We hosted our second annual Blue Tech by the Bay, a partnership event with Career Connect Northwest, Northwest Educational Service District. It's a 5-county district that works with high school students and high schools about integrating some direct pipeline workforce associated with their work at the high schools. So we had about 120 high school students this year, down just a little bit from 140 the year before. Partnering with 15 different businesses, Northline Seafood, All-American Marine, maritime businesses, and then giving resource fairs to Bellingham Technical College, Whatcom Community College, Western Washington University, just to be able to get a hands-on event so that kids can understand what maritime is and how they can go down into that path if they're interested in doing it. Just a great example of the work kind of growing the blue economy and establishing workforce pipelines. The other part on workforce development is just strengthening partnerships. The ports team has been working just recently was at the Forging Maritime Capacity, looking at welding opportunities. Welding is kind of the heart of construction and maritime and agriculture, actually. So it's a skill that as you grow and learn, you can go across different types of sectors and be able to recognize that. And the Center of Excellence in Marine Manufacturing and Technology was hosting a large group of workforce development people within the region. Ron from All American Marine actually presented there as well. And it was also kind of in partnership with Northwest Education and Workforce Coalition. So we will continue to work with our partners. We don't specifically provide like workforce efforts. We try to help make connections as our economic development team hosts that fair, but really kind of show what everybody else's work is associated with it. So then we'll go quickly into the SEDS update. So just to start, there has been a large community engagement effort, 617 responses. We came close to the Bellingham Plan's community engagement work, but didn't quite meet that. But I think 617 over a 60-day is really quite good. We've worked specifically with the cities and the county on jurisdictional and sector SWOTs, so really understanding the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats from an economic standpoint. Have 75 interviews to date. A couple of city council members were able to participate, so thank you for that. And close to 45 private sector interviews. So with the Team Wacom, we have 94 in total, so up to 100 one-hour interviews from across the different range of input. I've also been able to get input from Team Wacom, the Nooksack Indian tribal leadership. We're having conversations with the Lummi and Nooksack tribal business and entrepreneurs. Both Lummi Nation and the Nooksack Indian tribe accomplished their own SEDS, but it was very important for us to also integrate their perspectives and ideas into the countywide SEDS. And we've been able to accomplish that for the first year, so that's great. And we will kind of continue with that community engagement through June, so through the next month or so. As we are doing those interviews, we're really kind of hearing trends overall. And what have we heard? We've heard infrastructure, 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 and a number of different infrastructures. So roads and sewer and water as cities provide, but also industry or sector-specific infrastructure. So back to the agricultural production, they will have a certain ability to move those products, and in that agriculture, it would be cold storage or food processing, and that's kind of an industry-specific infrastructure that we need to think and focus on. But you know, as we are expanding, like the Pure Blue Tech example and the infrastructure study that we've also accomplished, it's clear that we have vacancy rates that are too low also in commercial. And I know the city's been doing some work on the downtown vacancy rates, which are high, and we're going to try to figure out ways and efforts to be able to provide the welcoming scenario and the opportunities to move people into the downtown. At the same time, we need to accomplish kind of a vacancy conversation and infrastructure needed for manufacturing, for advanced manufacturing opportunities. Affordability is also a trend we've been hearing. Really, you know, cost of living, rising costs in all areas, especially housing, healthcare overhead costs, childcare costs that are associated with it. The labor shortage is ongoing. That's where the work on workforce continues to need to be done. Market hesitancies are high, uncertainties continue to be high. I think we all feel that. Business owners feel that as well. And then, you know, the ongoing conversation of just the regulatory environment is extremely challenging. One indicated as a death by 1,000 cuts. You all know, or at least I have some background in that planning sector, and I understand how complicated it really is. From a city and county standpoint to the businesses that are going through that regulation. So we just have to keep our eye on the ball, keep focusing on how to be welcoming through those permit processes, as knowledgeable as planning staff is, try to get opportunities for business owners to be the same. And we have some thoughts about that. And we want to try to integrate some of the path forward into the SEDS. So maybe on an annual basis, we can look back and think to ourselves, how has the county done on permitting efficiencies, or how has the city done on X, Y, and Z? So we want to be an opportunity for that conversation if so interested. The emerging priorities, really kind of taking that input, rising it up. We want to focus on infrastructure from a SED standpoint. We want to focus on affordability, and we want to focus on accessibility. Not just ADA accessibility, but accessibility kind of more broad term. Back to the permitting discussions and the definitions of how are people aware of that regulation so that they become more accessible and knowledgeable to get through that process. Or how can people be able to utilize the things and the tools that the SBDC provide, or the port provides, or the city staff provides, that becomes more accessible through that whole process and where it goes. Just a draft vision, and we really are looking for the draft vision. We commit to work together to create a welcoming, innovative economy with opportunities for everyone. There's really kind of trying to be more action-orientated, trying to recognize a desired future state and reflects all the inputs that we have gotten. We're still working on the vision, so if you have input on the vision, I'd be open to hearing that input and where it goes. We have kind of really had conversations with the Whatcom County Business and Commerce Committee, the Team Whatcom, the SEDS Review Committee, which is about 26 different individuals throughout. And in that vision becomes continued goals of one being infrastructure, two being vitality, business vitality. So this is where business recruitment or expansion and retention, some work that the city would be doing through the planning department and other work to help kind of prioritize investments in businesses and entrepreneurs. The workforce efforts that I talked about earlier, we are recognizing the affordability that's associated with business growth and the employees that are there. And then a goal on resiliency. The resiliency is kind of that larger conversation with recognizing the floods over the years, but also kind of how do we become more of a resilient community as it moves forward. So the work that we're doing now and the work that I probably won't get to today, but it's in the presentation, is kind of the sub-goals and then action items associated with each one of these goals. As we are doing that, we're really kind of identifying specific action items that are specific, measurable, ones that we can attain, ones that we can report on. So then on an annual basis, we would report back within that 5-year time frame, working with the SEDS Review Committee, and then really identifying a lead for each one of those actions so that we can report back, what has the Port of Bellingham's economic development team done? How has this city's permit and planning group done? What work has SBDC done through the business work that they do from technical assistance? Understand the outcomes and metrics associated with it, and then have some specific timelines associated with that. So that's where we're moving forward. Now we have the goals and the sub-goals, and now we're really identifying the action items, and we're hopeful to have that work done by the end of this year. And we'll be reporting back to the city council, hopefully. We'll have to go to the county council for approval. These comprehensive economic development strategies are approved by the county council. And then that will become a roadmap of all of the great economic development work and tough economic development work, especially in this climate, and some of the situations that we arise for the next 5 years. At the end of the presentation are some sub-goals of that work. And again, I sent that by email to city council, this morning. And so don't hesitate I sent it to the general council email. So don't hesitate to take a look at it and read through the sub-goals that are in each one. And then reach out to me if you have any questions, or Dr. Jennifer Novak, or to city staff to be able to get some input associated with that. Thank you.
So we'll go ahead and move to the CJ's presentation and then open it up for questions.
I don't know where it went. It was the PowerPoint.
Good afternoon, CJ Seitz, Western Washington University Small Business Development Center. So I know that, we're operating in a really challenging and dynamic environment, and my commitment to you today is to leave this conversation with a vision of hope. I wanted to start by talking about some of the projects that I'm currently working on. I'm working with A1 Design Build. They're a worker-owned cooperative construction company. They are working on building a fabrication facility to fabricate straw structural insulated panels. Well, they'll be sourcing materials locally and creating local jobs and increasing the supply chains. So where we come in is that I am working on the pro formas, the projections, and working on a capital stack with them. I'm also working with a woman who owns a professional business services firm, and she's grown this firm, and she's added lots of jobs, and now she wants to work on her business, not in her business. So we're working on tools to make that happen, and our current project is working with her P&L to make it less of a tax document and make it a managerial tool. So I'm working with her CPA firm to rework some of her charts of accounts. Our story and our work is the success of this community full of inspiring entrepreneurs. And we define entrepreneurs as not just the people that are starting businesses, but everybody who's in a small business, owning and managing that, because they are innovators. They're the ones who know they see the gaps, they see the opportunities, and whether this is in a new product line or how they solve an old problem in a new way. So just under half of the businesses that we work with are what we call pre-venture, so there might be ideating still. And then early startups, for us, we define that by a year or less. We help people that are considering starting a business refine their idea and also help them avoid investing time and effort in a business that wouldn't be successful. Now, that's not something that we have a metric for, right? But it's something that we think is really great, helping people make decisions through data, and maybe they decide not to do something. In 2025, we assisted 29 entrepreneurs launch new businesses. The top 2 industries were professional and scientific and healthcare. So over half of our clients have been in business for over a year. About half of the clients we serve each year are legacy relationships. Our assistance changes over time as their needs change. Right now, businesses are facing an increasingly tight margins, and so we're helping those clients build resilience. We're helping them pivot. We did the same thing through COVID. So many businesses had to learn how to adapt to a whole new business and operating environment, and that really gives us hope. That we can adapt, we can change. And also the businesses, we don't traditionally measure how much we help businesses increase sales, but we help our businesses increase sales by nearly $20 million last year, which also helps with the tax base. And then I'm not going to go in, we usually talk about lots of stories, and I'm not going to go into all the stories because you have in front of you our annual report, and we go into depth about these businesses, and I encourage you to take some time to look at it, read through it. There's some great stories. One of them is Green Mountain Physical Therapy, which Eric Grimstead helped them a lot, and it's a great story. Our client portfolio includes a wide range of businesses, demographics, and needs across a representative cross-section of our small business community. Many of our clients we see, they have more opportunity in entrepreneurship than they would in the labor market. And our research tells us that having diverse entrepreneurs broadens our talent pool, it fosters disruptive innovation, and expands consumer reach. Communities that avoid over-reliance on a few large industries help create community resilience. We've talked to this group a bit about retaining local businesses. We want to keep and retain and grow our local strong businesses. It's the best bang for our buck. And so buy-sell is something we continue to build on. Over 20% of the work that we did last year was buy-sell. We work on either side of the transactions. And so we spent 456 hours doing that last year. This is a story in the annual report about the Lost Company. This is a company that Sherry Damon helped do a transfer. We're also seeing a lot of generational business transfer, so a lot of people retiring and then their children are buying those businesses. Additionally, we help the Washington Center for Employee Ownership. It's located here in Bellingham, and we do technical assistance for them behind the scenes. These are the traditional measures that we report to the federal government, which is through the Small Business Administration. Keep in mind, all of the impacts that we report have to be signed off by the business owner to say that we substantially help them meet these goals. So in 2025, we assisted 533 entrepreneurs, and these are people we sat down with one-on-one and provided confidential business counseling to. This doesn't include group training. This doesn't include the almost 200 other people that called us and asked questions like, hey, can you tell me a good attorney? Or, hey, do you need a business license in the city of Bellingham? And our staff are trained that, we can provide those. And I also was really curious because we see clients year over year, so we have these deep relationships. And I was like, well, let's take a 5-year look. And what does that look like in 5 years? So it was over 1,800 unique people that we worked with, 125 business starts, nearly 1,000 jobs created, and over $50 million in that capital investment. So that's now new capital that's coming into our community, either equity, loans, owner investment. So why invest in the SBDC? I know budgets are tight and we're all competing for dollars. It's a hard one. We know that clients that come to the SBDC and start a business with us have a higher survival rate than Washington on average new business starts. For every local dollar that's invested in our program, we're returning that in over $17 in that way of just that capital investment. And then there's the compound impact. I'm being told this 1,400 number of jobs reported, probably severely underreported, and we're working on updating that number. So we support these jobs, we support a tax base, but we also support people, right? We know that businesses that are managed well, that's better for families, it's better for retention, and it's just better for overall community resilience. So this is your SBDC Certified Business Advisor team. So all these people have advanced business education. They're all certified with the state of Washington to provide this assistance. They've all owned or managed their own small businesses. So this team of experts, we live and we work in this community, and we deeply care about this community. Collectively, we have over 100 years living and working here, having relationships. And we're in this unique position. Not only are we working with stakeholders, across the ecosystem to make things happen, but we're also working in industry, and we're learning. So this team, they spoke to 533 businesses last year. And we sit down quarterly and we try to identify, like, hey, are there any through themes in this industry? Are there any regulations that are tripping people up? Or what are you seeing? Or, hey, are you seeing opportunities? Because we're trained to think like entrepreneurs too, right? So we're like, hey, what do you see in there? We also learn from our clients. We learn because our clients are deeply embedded, they're industry experts. So I might learn something about what's coming down from L&I about electricians through a solar company that I work with, and then I share that because we're not all. I share that and how people are tackling that innovatively in the community. So we sit down quarterly. We try to find these intel that we might have, and it's important to us to feed that intelligence back into the system because we all are stronger together. And we do that. It takes an enormous amount of time, but we do this through this quarterly report that's hopefully sent to all of you, but you should have it in front of you. There's a lot of data in here, but I wanted to make sure to address that we have some highlights and updates. That's an important section. But for leaders, I think the most important section is the small trends and what is it? Small business trends and observations page. And this is really, we're like, this is a word on the street. This is what we're hearing. This is what we're seeing. And people do call us. I had 3 phone calls last week from legislators or other business owners are saying, hey, I read about that. Tell me more. So our core work is in the middle of this circle, this individual business advising. This is what we're contracted to do, this one-on-one. This is what we talk about all the time. But individual advising does not happen in a vacuum. We do a lot behind the scenes to build and improve and support and connect business ecosystem in ways that are not visible, and that couldn't really happen without us. And that supports not just the businesses, but beyond with our clients. So this might look like identifying resources. It might look like people calling us and say, hey, can you review our grant and look at the financial language? Or hey, will you write a letter of support for this grant? It might look like, hey, you have trust in this community, and I don't really know those people very well. Do you mind extending and sponsoring me with some of those folks and introducing it? So we have entree into a trusted community that we do leverage as best as we can. So we are networked, and we're working on a collaboration-first strategy. So I wanted to give you an example of how this works for us. This is just one that happens all the time. So Dr. Liliana Deck, who's with us here today, is working with the Whatcom Conservation District on helping bring resources to first-generation farmers. So that we're coming in with that technical assistance. They both leverage their trust in communities that aren't coming to us, right? And so they've met these communities. Liliana's providing technical assistance on being capital ready. She's helping get resources that were available from the flood, that resources of people that have never gotten these resources before. And then they identified some USDA grants that they qualified for. So they helped write these USDA grants. They got the USDA grants, great. But these grants, as you all probably know, as painful as I do, are federal cost reimbursable grants. So you have to do the work, and then apply for the money, and then wait for the federal government to pay you. So this isn't super zippy. So a lot of our clients can't even access these grants because they don't have the cash flow. They don't have the cash flow to support the grants. And so because I sit on the Impact Investing Committee for the Whatcom Community Foundation, and I know that we give cash flow grants, bridge money, to nonprofits who are in this situation, I said, knock, 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 would you consider doing that for private businesses? Could you bridge loan? And yes, they did, and we're working on those right now. So that's helping bring more money into our community. Our goal is to maximize resources with strong relationships. That makes us all more efficient and more effective. So some of the system work that we work on beyond this individualized counseling, it's no surprise to anybody that credit is really hard. The last few years, it's gotten harder and harder. If you're a startup, if you haven't banked before, or if something went wrong, I'm not saying it's impossible, but it is hard to get funding. So we started this microloan program with First Fed and with the Whatcom Community Foundation, and these loans are available between $2,500 and $50,000, and these are for people that are not traditionally bankable. And we're just getting through our pilot to be able to talk more about it, and there's a lot more information in that annual report. I just got certified in crowdfunding, and so we all know about crowdfunding like Kickstarter or rewards or pre-sales, and that's great. That is crowdfunding. But crowdfunding is also equity raises. It's also debt. In the greater sense of it, it's harvesting capital that is in our communities. It's harvesting capital that is here that we want to activate and move. The people that are frequenting these businesses, that love these businesses, like, hey, invest here. Let's start moving that capital. And so our vision with this is that, and we know from research, that the more that we can activate our local capital here and activate investment, we're going to start attracting more and more outside investment. Building resiliency, of course, we talked about retention a lot, and we work on resiliency all the time. If it's not like working on a variety of customers or products or working on cybersecurity or how you use AI. Insurance, I'm doing a lot of that work right now. But we also do it on a community-wide basis. So but both the 21 and the 25 floods, we took lead on that with the Business Recovery Task Force. And we also are the official communication hub. So as a system, we all decided, like, hey, let's make this as easy as we can on our entrepreneurs that were affected by this disaster. So there's a one-stop shop through us. And so it's Ash Ryder who heads that up, and with our admin team, going through resources, helping explain those resources, communicating out to the system. Our flood recovery page saw over 2,000 unique visits since December 11. And this is my last slide. I want to really talk about harnessing local potential. So our entrepreneurial energy drives our local economy. It is our culture. And these aren't just these good sounding words. Our entrepreneurs make our community distinct from others, and they make us truly resistant to the challenges that are coming. I've mentioned that we've been working in partnership with philanthropy, with investors, with workforce, and with education leadership behind the scenes. And we're interested in how do we make this more efficient? How do we bring in more investors to collaborate? How can we formalize and build these systems that'll live beyond these relationships these really strong relationships we have behind the scenes? You know, my personal vision, when I look at what's going on in Whatcom County and I look at the energy that's available and the programming and the investment, I see no reason why we can't be known regionally, if not nationally, as a place to go, as a place to be. If you want to innovate, if you want to be around other entrepreneurs, if you want wraparound support systems, Bellingham, check them out. They're doing some cool stuff. So to that end, I've been working with Maury Ingram. She's the CEO and president of the Whatcom Community Foundation. And we're working in partnership. It's definitely her brainchild and her lead. She's awesome. And I'm sure there's going to be hopefully a lot more conversations and people involved, but she's working on an inclusive economic summit. So the goal is to build on values and aspirations and assets of our local economy, to bring together thought leaders near and far to share ideas and strategies and tools that can create more local opportunities for a broader swath of people. And the coolest part is that we want to use Whatcom County, Bellingham as the incubator, as the test case, and bring these thought leaders and say, hey, let's actually work on a problem. Let's work on an opportunity, I should say. Let's work here and develop some ideas. I'm super excited about it, and we're looking for 27. So this is my call to action for you all. So we need the brightest and best minds to collaborate during these challenging times to harness all of our opportunities. And I just welcome you, if you have any ideas or thoughts, to reach out and give us a call and work towards this better future. So thank you for supporting the SBDC, and thank you for supporting our entrepreneurs. And with that, I'll see if you have any questions for Tyler or me.
Thank you to both our presenters. I'll first turn to committee. This item is just for information and discussion, so questions or comments? Councilmember Huffman.
Thank you for the presentation, both presentations in one. The question that I hear a lot, I guess, is, what does the city of Bellingham do to support small businesses? And I think this is one of the more important but less visible ways that I think the city supports small businesses in our community. A lot of the work that's happening is just one-on-one confidential work, and it's not flashy, but it keeps businesses open, and it makes employers better employers. It it helps people with a great idea, but not the entire skill set that you need to keep a business running. Land that great idea and benefit our community. So I just thank you for the work that you do. Thank all of you for sticking around, many of you, for so long with this organization and impacting our community. I think one of the slides that really struck me was the diversity of entrepreneurs, of the individuals that start businesses in Bellingham and have businesses in Bellingham, and just how that impacts the diversity of our community as a whole. Makes us stronger, makes us more resilient, makes us more interesting and a better place to live. So that's a really fun slide to show. And really excited about that micro-lending program. I think that, again, is one way of problem solving to help those people that have a fantastic idea, but might not have the means to bring it to life. That our community can help them do that. So thank you for that work.
Thank you.
I'll take a stab at a question. One of the things the city is working on, this is probably mostly for SBDC, is updating our home occupations chapter. And I'm curious I'm sure you've been looped into that, but what role you see that opportunity playing in business incubation today, and any kind guiding advice or perspective that you can provide us.
Yeah, so I believe their planners have reached out to me, and we have had some initial conversations. I actually looked at some academic research, just being nerdy, and I'm excited about it. I see the potential. I wonder how many people are sort of doing the work already behind the scenes, and so the part that excites me is like, come out into the light. Let's celebrate and do this work together. I think that also just getting the cottage food. I don't know, I think it's cottage food permits. If we are talking about that more, and then and I looked for some best practices around it, as I'm sure your staff, there's two really bright, fun women that called me, and I'm sorry, I can't remember their names, and they're looking at this stuff too, but just some more wraparound services and being more visible with that and helping them, understand the benefits and not be afraid of compliance. So I think with wraparound services, you might have a lot of success there.
Thank you for that perspective. And Councilmember Williams.
Yeah, this is more of a question for Tyler. I believe it was you last year gave us a presentation on the development of industrial lands and so forth, and the amount of industrial property we would need countywide to kind of build the industrial economy. What is the studies telling you as we go down that path? Are we making progress? Or?
Yeah, thanks for the question, Councilmember. Yeah, the Port of Bellingham did do the industrial land study last year, and the idea was really to help inform the cities and the county's comprehensive plan. I would say that the report was issued a little later to really add enough value where it could be integrated into the comprehensive plan. But I do believe it has recognized that the industrial lands, and when I say industrial lands, it's not just heavy impact industrial, right? It's advanced manufacturing. It's those innovators that are in somebody's, the garage space of 5,000 to 10,000 with an office that will soon become a 50,000 square foot facility. It's not always the heavy impact industrial, so I just want to recognize that. But it did clearly indicate that the industrial lands along freight corridors is limited in our community, in Bellingham and throughout Whatcom County. And it gave some recommendations on certain vacancy rates and square footages, as well as types of properties, being acreage or how big a property should be for the 30,000 square foot industrial facility. And like I indicated earlier in the presentation, and I know Bellingham's planning staff have thought a lot about the question and how it relates specifically to Bellingham's land use, but they're way more educated on that than I am. But I do know that the county council is anticipating to do more, or considering probably tomorrow actually, some language in their comp plan to take the next steps on that on the industrial land study. And what that would look like is look at freight routes within the city of Bellingham or the city of Ferndale, and how that connects to areas where there's industrial zoned lands that aren't impacted by other development regulations, that you could actually accomplish some larger scale industrial development. From a Bellingham standpoint, I would think like maybe the Hannigan, Bakerview area, north of the Iron Gate location. There's a business park that's behind Yamamoto's that is actually a good example of what that could look like to give the vacancies and the land available. For Ferndale, there's other examples like up in Grandview. And so the idea of that study was to kind of call to question the availability, provide some data that what we all anticipated was that there isn't enough land available, and then to work with the city and the county to think about a planning effort that goes along with it, as well as with Whatcom Council of Governments on the freight and transportation network.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, we'll move to full council. Councilmember Anderson.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation to both of you and your teams. Just kind of wondering on like a councilmatic level, both of your areas are similar but different, larger industrial, helping startups. What do you, and talking to clients or potential clients, what do you see as being some of their biggest roadblocks, whether it's like workforce housing, right size industrial or transportation versus funding and perhaps trained workforce? But I'm just kind of wondering, like, for the next few years, like as we eye things to try to help increase and diversify our employment sector, what do you see in talking with your clients as some of the biggest barriers facing either expansion or startup of businesses?
Go for it.
I'm looking at my crew here to jump in. I mean, a lot of what we're going to say is the broader economy, right? So the inputs are harder. Everything's more expensive. The labor's more expensive. We are one of the higher minimum wage states. Having said that, the businesses, like I'm thinking of like there's businesses downtown that are in those sectors that are absolutely killing it. And if so, we want people to come work with us. If you don't know your numbers, you can't drive anywhere, right? If you don't have a solid foundation, you're not going to make it up in volume. So I'll say that for one, it's the economic conditions are challenging. And so when I do talk about that, I also want to remember that we have been disruption. There's opportunity, and there's exciting parts of it, and sometimes it's painful, and really great stuff happens outside of it. Like our consumer behavior has changed since COVID, and so I like remote working. There's a lot of things that are different. So I want to say that there's some hope in there, and I guess I encourage people to be able to pivot and be creative and not hold on to what is super tightly. And then when I think about, what is our responsibility and what's business's own responsibility, I think creating the forum to convene and have conversations is our responsibility. But these people are so smart. They're the experts in what they do, so we need to harvest from them ideas too. We need to talk to them and get ideas from them and then help them work with those ideas. So I would say that to start. And I'd also, thinking about other sectors, and we have so much healthcare that's not Peace Health that we work with. And look at those nods. Of course, I don't work with them, with these businesses, but these brilliant, talented people do. But I'm hearing from them too. The reimbursement rates are super hard, and so these are bigger system issues, right? So if you have insurance and Medicaid not reimbursing well, what are the levers that you can pull? Do you have a good medical coder? What are the So I'm thinking industry to industry. Do you have anything else? Smart people that are smarter than me. Mm-hmm. Here they come. This is Eric Grimstead.
Well, so for years, one of the industries that we often referenced was the brewery industry. And as you can imagine, with a lot of macro changes in that world, a lot of people are drinking less, which is probably a good thing, unless you're a brewer. But we would see business plans come into us and say, well, Bellingham kind of looks like Bend, Oregon. Bend, Oregon has 17 breweries, so surely we can support 17 breweries, can't we? And nerds like us would go, well, it kind of depends on how we start looking at the overall population. But as CJ referenced, COVID taught us what you need to do to pivot when you're presented with a change in the rules or a change in the landscape. So our brewers and cideries, and I'm sure anybody else that's primarily selling alcoholic beverages, have to start thinking about non-alcoholic options, diversifying, changing their customer base, trying to get the people that frequent them back in more often. So those are a few things that we try and encourage our clients to think about to address the tough economic conditions. To answer your question specifically, I think capital is the biggest challenge for most folks. So if they can't get bankable which is something that we help a lot of our entrepreneurs get to that point, to get to a yes. And even if they can't get to a yes at a bank, figure out the other pathways to the financial funding that you need so that you can be successful.
That's great. That's great. Thank you. Appreciate it.
I'll try and contact them.
I would just add, like, as the city council moves forward and thinks about policies, how can your policies be welcoming to businesses? Okay, how can they be accomplished in a way where a business owner is excited about the services that the city of Bellingham provides and the opportunities that are associated with it? I just saw this thing that it recognizes, like, economic development isn't just about incentives. It's about providing a welcoming arena for businesses to grow. And there are a number of ways that, now that I've spent in this term a little bit, ways that the city or the county can provide a welcoming opportunity for business growth, for entrepreneurs. So just keep that in the back of your head as you're looking at some of the policies. And I could go through a number of different examples, but that's not probably today. But I think if we can become a more welcoming community as it relates to those entrepreneurs that CJ are working with, or as it relates to some of the larger employers that are looking to invest back into our community or to grow, there'd be the investment that we would need to grow our job base and the capital opportunities that some of our other businesses struggle.
I can say I'm not the only one who sees construction companies, but I headed up because I was in construction for a while. And I had somebody say to me, I got a permit in record speed from the city of Bellingham. And so they were super excited about that. That's just one person. But I don't know if you've been working on that or not, but he was really excited.
And we've been, through the SEDS process, we've been getting good input on some of the work the city of Bellingham's been accomplishing. From the availability of data or metrics that's online, or some of the other work that I'm sure the planning department's been accomplishing. So just keep that work up and make sure to focus it on it. And I know that it's important to the mayor and the administration and the city council.
And then when you're doing that work, I would encourage you to put it out there and tell your story. There's so many cool things happening.
Councilmember Anderson, on this note, we have till 3:05, but I'd be okay going a little later. I'm looking to staff and.
We also have one other,
and there's an immediate one too. Okay, so we'll try and keep this one or two more questions. Okay, Councilmember Anderson.
It's okay, I could pass. I was just going to, okay, I'm halfway there. One of the policies, an example, and I didn't know how to go further with assistance, was when we did the styrofoam ban. And so talking with a few restaurants and owners that I knew, we talked about how great it would be to have a co-op in order to buy the consumables at a lower price, because each small restaurant, their price was higher, but if they could buy in mass, it could lower it, make it more affordable. But the people that I talked to, nobody had the warehousing or ability, nor the time and staff in order to try to create a co-op situation. But I think of other legislative things that can impact the cost of things as we go through and make changes. But something like that, is that something that you folks would be equipped to try to help facilitate? Like, how would a group of people be able to address that and create a co-op situation? And I think of our medical marijuana areas, growers, people that I've spoken to who might be able to expand, but then where can they expand has been an issue. And then bringing products out, being able to have, anyway, there's areas in our community that could grow, but some of the areas that are a problem is location, and then also not enough money for a co-op to be existing as a business, because then the resale then brings the price up, but then if there was the ability, it could bring the price down. So never could quite cover that hurdle in my position, and never quite knew where to refer people for assistance.
You could definitely refer people our way. I was hearing a lot of like, potential solutions in what we were talking about as a purchasing co-op, I think. And those exist, like there's outdoor retailers, for instance, that are part of purchasing co-ops in town. They don't warehouse, but they're getting together with a ton of other retail folks that are small. Outdoor retail folks that are smaller, and they are working in these purchasing co-ops. And I'm going to see if anyone knows, but I think there's a few ways to solve that problem, and it would be interested in having those conversations.
I did refer them to you, but I'm not sure, I didn't follow up if they actually pursued it. This would have been 4 years ago.
Oh, I don't know. Maybe refer again. We love it. But it's a great idea, when there's big change like that, to figure out how to come together and then buy in bulk. Certainly, I forget the largest person that does the food restaurant supply. I would start negotiating right there.
Thank you so much to both our presenters. I will certainly invite you to stick around for our next agenda item if you're interested, but no worries if you got to go. This next item is a work session on downtown occupancy trends and strategies to address vacancies. As a reminder, as a part of the Downtown Forward initiative, the city initiated a project to better understand and address commercial vacancies. And this is a carryover from a previous committee meeting. I'll first recognize Tara Sundin for introductory comments.
Yes, just a few comments. Darby's going to throw up one slide. We have the slide deck in case you want to refer to it. As a reminder, this project came out of the Downtown Forward initiative. It was to really get a better handle on what the actual vacancy rates were. There was a lot of talk about it, but we didn't really have a handle on what was really happening. It encompassed 61 blocks within our Main Street boundary. It's a very large downtown, approximately 204 acres and 2 million square feet of ground floor space. The mall itself is 750,000 square feet. So just the ground floor is nearly 3 times what Bellis Fair is. So it's a very large area, especially for a city that has 100,000 residents. What we found was that our overall vacancy rate was around 10%. That's for that entire area. But when we zeroed in on that pedestrian oriented area, or we're calling it a pedestrian core, where people really think of downtown center, we did see that vacancies were higher at 14.6%. And that is a figure that is not acceptable to us. So our goal is to see that figure drop to under 10%. I'm not repeating our presentation last time, but we talked about all the various reasons for this, right? There's different sizes. As you heard in the earlier presentations, the dynamics, there's shifts in consumer behaviors, there's shifts in how much space people actually need. So lots of reasons for those vacancies. And one other thing I wanted to point out is that there are a lot of actions the city undertakes to bring more people to downtown, to get more people to live downtown, to get more people to build housing downtown so people can live downtown so they can shop downtown. There's lots of things we do to drive more tourists downtown. We invest considerably in the arts downtown. We also invest considerably in the perception, so cleaning and public safety and all of that. There's lots of things that we're doing that you don't see in this implementation plan. So since our presentation, it's like, well, what about, and what about? And yes, we do a lot that's outside of this implementation strategy. We just tried to really focus in on the actual vacancies and things that the city of Bellingham can do to address this issue. And and what we learned is we need to keep doing what we are doing. We have every incentive that we possibly can that the states has allowed us to undertake. it's here. It's in downtown, but we noticed that we could do, or realized we can do more. And so that's what that implementation strategy is about. And Darby, unless you have any other, we just want to now open it up for your discussion.
Thank you. Okay, I think we might have a lot of comments, so maybe we can have a target of at least wrapping up by 3:20, if that sounds good. So keep that in your mind. But Councilmember Huffman, take us away.
Thank you. Trying to decide where to start here. I think the stalled asset category is particularly interesting to me, and that seems like a particularly difficult challenge. We can't decide who owns a building or not, and we can't necessarily tell a building owner what to do with their building. Can you talk about some of the problem solving that is within our control for those stalled assets? So, spaces that have been vacant for a very long period of time.
It's interesting that you picked probably the most challenging of the three for us to focus on. We put just about everything that we possibly could for each category. There are some unique challenges to the individuals that own some of those sites. But in some cases, like there's some property on Prospect that's for sale right now. So anything that we can do to help with, like we installed some window wraps that are going around or on that property to make it look better, make it look more attractive. We don't get to decide what somebody says they think the building's worth. And so that's an issue. But I expect now that the property is on the market, that reality will come. We've gone as far as actually putting public-private partnerships together to tackle some of these vacancies. That's certainly something that we could pull on that thread in the future when we have more resources available. Yeah, go ahead, Darby. We're going to kind of tag team because we'll think of different things.
Hi, Darby Galligan, Planning and Community Development. There's a couple other strategies that we have identified that are, we try to balance the carrots and sticks, right? And I think last time the mayor mentioned one effort that is not permitted right now, but the vacancy tax strategy, where there's a little bit more of a lever to get some of those stalled assets to maybe get raised up on the priority level. So continuing advocacy around that at the state. And then there's another strategy around a vacancy tax or vacancy registry, which would be more of a local effort. I think some of that involves weighing the amount of administration with the benefit. But we've been doing some research and exploration around tying that registry to action. So at the very least, having a lever that you have to register, and if you're not activating the windows or the spaces or doing things to contribute to the environment, that there could be a link there. So those are two other examples that are on the list for further investigation and discussion.
I'll take a stab and then back to you, Huffman. Maybe this is a question for SBDC, but maybe for you guys too. What, from a business owner's perspective, like what are the biggest barriers to like expanding to a storefront space? And are there any policy mechanisms to help with any of those, like, costs around renovation or like, is there more that we could do to make the initial transition into a storefront space? I know we don't want to like get people into a space that they can't afford, but I'm wondering if there are other tools.
A couple of action items for us is we'll be looking at prioritized permitting in the core area to expedite permitting, and that's assuming somebody has put together the capital to do the tenant improvements. Another task for us is to work with, we talked a bit about those larger footprint spaces like the former greenhouse space, is to put together a team, and an internal team that would include our building official and our fire marshal, to kind of strategize with their architects to figure out how to take that space down. It's complicated with we need to make sure that those spaces are safe for people entering and exiting, but that can pose some challenges. I would expect, what we've heard is sometimes the spaces require, and the SBDC may have some specific examples of this, considerable amount of money needed in order to get those spaces up to a place where they need to be in order to have them be in a condition that customers want to come in, and that there are not always the landlords willing to invest in some of those spaces. So that's a challenging dynamic. I don't know, CJ, do you want to speak to capital for TIs? You're welcome to, since you're sitting here. Okay.
About that piece, but
You have to either come to Mike or I can.
CJ Seiss again, the SBDC. I don't feel like I have a ton to say about, but it would be really interesting to research a little bit best practices, what have happened at other places. I do know that many of our clients have some barriers, and I want to say a lot of it's around earthquake retrofitting. Is that right? And so, I mean, I think there's things that who knows what we don't know, right? So I would look at best practices and see what others have done in that area. I mean, any capital has to pencil out, and some ideas off the top of my head would be to maybe, work on some pro formas of, using benchmark data to like what could be possible here, like what kind of revenue is needed and what kind of industries can bring that in. But I think there's ways that we can bring our technical nerd assistance to assist. But in terms of like getting capital, it's all just, can you handle the debt service? Is this a good project? Do you have the collateral to support that project? And this is not everybody in our community. So the things I think of is what we've done before, which I think is successful, is bringing other second locations, because if they've proven that before, banks are investing in people, and so those people, if you can prove you have a strong track record, it's going to help. I'd love to put some time and energy into thinking about it, but I feel undereducated to give too much of an answer.
Thanks.
If I could just add two more initiatives that involve the service side of things. One tool that we offer to help interested businesses kind of get the lay of the land is a pre-inspection program to invite the building services division and the fire department to come into the space ahead of time so that they can know what they're getting into before they get too deep into that process. And then another position, we're reframing it a little bit as a business advocate and having discussions with the Downtown Bellingham Partnership around reestablishing a position and what would that look like to have somebody who's there on the ground doing matchmaking with the spaces, but also assisting with resources, both with financing and with permitting and approval processes, to do a little bit of guidance when that's helpful and needed.
We'll go to Councilmember Anderson and then to Huffman.
Thank you. It's all about resources and staff time and energy and our partners. But I'm thinking of an example. I'm on a nonprofit board, and nonprofits don't have a lot of money, but they owned a building, and the building needed quite a bit of renovation just because it's an old historic building. And they qualified for a federal grant and received a sizable amount of money so that they can be doing upgrades over the next year or two. Some of our private-owned buildings, they are not the nonprofits, so they're not going to qualify for some of that federal money. but some of the buildings may qualify for being historic, and then if our numbers are still staying where they are, and I don't know if we'd ever hit the mark of being a depressed downtown, but is anyone kind of looking with the lens of identifying which buildings may qualify as being considered historic for preservation, and there's grants and stuff out there, and then trying to make that connection for people who might be resource constrained to be able to go in and do the upgrades needed, not only to preserve the building, but also to perhaps in the future be able to renovate it to do clients. I'm just thinking if I was an owner of the building and didn't have the wherewithal or even necessarily a desire, it's kind of a carrot and a stick approach of like, here you go, but doing some of that initial investigation of what's available and helping try to make those connections. Not necessarily writing the grants for them because they should bear some of that cost, but just kind of pushing them in the right direction towards those resources that might be available.
One of the best tools we have is the historic tax credit program. That's one of our existing incentives that we recognize we need to do a better job of promoting. That is one of our action items is to promote those programs. Those that, like Daylight Properties is very familiar with that program. But in essence, let's say you need to put $1 million into your building. If it's qualified improvements, then you would take that off of your taxes due, your tax bill over a number of years. That's how we provided technical assistance, for example, to the Prospect Theater, the person that owns that building, and allowed her to really put more money into that building to make it work. So we do need to do a bit better job. I'll have to explore whether or not there's grants for the private sector. I'm not familiar with them.
Low income loans too might be available.
And then of course the city, we have invested numerous times in some of the buildings downtown, like the Mount Baker Apartments, like the old Oakland block in Old Town, the La Bay Hotel. So when we have a historic building that has housing in it, we help make those investments. So that is another strategy we could explore. For a while, and that's why the Housing Authority did invest in the Oakland block and La Bay, is because we're really pushing our dollars to downtown. So that's something that we could look to again.
Councilmember Huffman, go ahead. Sorry, Darby, did you want to?
I just wanted to address the second part of your question, is that we do have extensive inventories of historic buildings and what's eligible and what might not be eligible. So if people have questions about that, we have some of it on our webpage, but also can offer assistance if they want to know whether they would be able to access those resources.
One other aspect of this plan that I'm particularly interested in, and I think it'd be a fabulous idea, is the business advocate position. I remember the retail advocate with the Downtown Bellingham Partnership, somebody very excited about helping businesses in the past. And I'm assuming that with this title, it's expanding the scope of that work potentially more than just retail specific. And I'm assuming it looks like also, again, through the Downtown Bellingham Partnership, potentially. Can you talk a little bit more about that and how we're potentially expected to be funding that, and how quickly it could come online? I would see this person as being part of, I think in our last presentation, we heard that a lot of this problem solving is collaborative. So being connected with the Small Business Development Center and the port, and with the chamber, and being a go-between to be able to share information. Sometimes being successful in business is just having access to information. So I could see this being extremely helpful.
So we'll probably tag team this answer as well. Previously, we split the cost. The Downtown Bellingham Partnership and the City of Bellingham split the cost of this position. It is in the action plan or in the implementation plan. We're looking at it for 2027, and it's just to explore whether or not we can come up with the resources necessary to pay for the FTE. We are expanding it to be beyond retail because, as you can see, we have more square footage downtown than retail could ever fill up. And we want that person to be looking, at the ground floor, but in all aspects of downtown. And there are some good news elements to what we learned too, which is that offices are really filled up downtown. So that's like a higher demand right now is those small offices. So any matchmaking a person could do on that front would be helpful as well. And then Darby has a better sense of kind of the job itself.
Yeah, all I'd add to that is I think there were some good lessons learned when the position was originally established. It was focused primarily on implementing the retail strategy. During COVID, the need for additional assistance and support became evident. And then the Downtown Bellingham Partnership has also done a great job establishing sort of a sister city relationship with the city of Everett. And they have a business advocate position, and they have visited us. We have visited them, or they have visited them, to learn a little bit more about what's working well with that, and kind of a little bit broader lens beyond just out there advocating and helping with expansion, but also other general business support, not to overlap with other resources that we already have in the community, but to help make those connections like you were talking about.
Council President Stone.
Yeah, there are so many things to talk about in this particular topic area, but I guess building on what other council members have addressed, and especially with the stalled assets in that position you were talking about with the prior presentation and thinking about the port, and maybe, Tyler Schroeder in particular, and the focus on economic development. Some of it I'm wondering, how much are we, right? We put certain strategies in place, but it's still sort of dependent upon those owners coming forward and engaging. And I understand it's very staff intensive, but how much, if at all, are we able to be initiating, right, that conversation or those contacts to really find out what is going on with this particular property and that ownership? I know sometimes there are very unique issues at play that are maybe far beyond our control. But I was just thinking about with, Lake Whatcom even, and when we're thinking about property acquisitions, and it's like, oh, well, we're dependent upon properties being for sale before we can engage. And so the city then taking that initiative to send out letters, right, to property owners to say, hey, if you're interested in selling, please reach out. I'm just wondering what, degree, understanding it would be very staff intensive, are we able to initiate, right, those contacts?
So we have the 3 categories, and Holly called upon the hardest one. But the first one is market ready. So we should be doing everything that we can to make those the easiest things to fill up, but based on their size and location, we think that they should be able to fill up. So, and there are still things that we should be doing there. Second category is those large footprint spaces. Let's make sure that there's some very motivated property owners that have those large footprint spaces. And let's do what we can to help them, because they are ready to put their money into those buildings. They want to make them work. They want to find tenants. So those would be the way I'd look at it. And then, although we have put a lot of time into stalled assets, every single one of those stalled assets has a special story behind it. And I think it is a special strategy for each one of those. A couple of them I think are easier than others, but it's sort of a rolled, and then even if you put it all, you potentially millions of dollars, like 2 we had, and it still doesn't pan out. It tells you that there's not too much, in one case, not as much. So I actually think focus on market ready and large footprint, and if we tackle that, we get into a really healthy realm. Meanwhile, yes, I do think that we could try some of those stalled assets, but they're just a little more challenging.
Certainly, and with those market ready, I mean, I'm hoping that we have that broader network of, right, support through the CBSC and the port and others to try and, right, do that matchmaking and try and fill those spaces, but recognizing that it is a lot. But I think there's motivation and support from the council as well if there are policy, right, matters that could help be a lever that we can pull on or to help develop further incentives. But as you mentioned, we've sort of maximized what's available to us at the state level to take advantage of.
And also, Tyler touched on this, but being, welcoming to business. I mean, one of our core roles at the city in economic development is a positive business climate. We have over 300 buildings in downtown Bellingham. That's a lot of different owners. We look to Daylight as like they own most of downtown. Well, they own 20-something of those lots of buildings. Very important stakeholder, but there's lots of them. So as they come up for sale, we really need downtown to be an attractive place for other people to buy, right? I think the solution for some of these stalled assets is sale. So we want downtown to be a really attractive place for people to spend their money and sink their money into these buildings. So that could go a long ways as well.
I'll chime in again, that another approach with the outreach component, I think that is important, and we've had some good conversations about certain situations that maybe the city not being the one to reach out, it's not always the best strategy, but how can partners also make those connections to share how important the space is for the community or for the mission? Because it's possible that it's fallen off the radar of the owner or the family or whatever it is. So how can we work together to make sure that it's, again, kind of elevated on the radar and the importance is shared, depending on the situation, who it might be a little bit different cases.
Over time, I'll just maybe flag as we continue to lobby for state efforts. I'm really interested in talking more about the registry and what the benefits of that could be and if the juice is worth the squeeze. And so anyway, would love to pick up that discussion as a full council at some point. But thank you so much to our guests and to our amazing staff working on this. With that, I'll turn it back to Council President Stone. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the presentations, and thank you for, the guest presenters, and for staying late for an additional item. We appreciate your time and partnership here locally, so thank you. We will take just a brief moment. We haven't had to pause because we've been running early, but now we will pause just a brief moment to line up the next committee meeting. Welcome back. So the last committee this afternoon is Committee of the Whole, just noting that all council members are present this afternoon. We do have executive session items, but before that, we have old and new business. So any items from council members for old and new? If not, you will have another opportunity this evening during the regular meeting. And just noting that I will be absent this evening, but that President Pro Tem Huffman will be covering to chair the meeting. So thank you for that coverage. So this afternoon, we have executive session. We have 4 items before us. So there was a late addition. So we have 3 potential property acquisitions. Those are all with Rosenblatt for approximately 3 minutes apiece. And then we also have a potential litigation matter also with Rosenblatt for approximately 10 minutes. So we're looking at approximately 20 minutes for executive session, and we could take a 5-minute break. So I plan to be back here around 3:50 to adjourn. So that concludes the business for the council in afternoon committee meetings. But again, we will reconvene this evening at 7 p.m. Thank you very much.